The night was meant to be nothing special. James had invited me to a work party, and as usual, I felt more like a prop than a partner. It wasn't that I didn't love him, I did. But the whole work event thing always made me feel out of place. These gatherings were filled with people who spoke a language I didn't understand. Talk of business deals, stocks, and power moves. It wasn't my world. It was his. James was in his element, as usual. He looked great, of course. Sharp suit, perfectly combed hair, and that smile that could charm anyone into doing anything. He was already making rounds, shaking hands, catching up with colleagues. Meanwhile, I stood awkwardly by the drinks table, pretending to engage with a few women I'd met through him. "You're so lucky to have such a supportive husband," one of them said to me, her voice sweet, almost too sweet. "Doesn't it feel amazing to just be there for him while he does all the important work?" I smiled tightly, nodding along, but inside I was bored. I didn't feel lucky. If anything, I felt invisible. I used to have dreams, ambitions. I used to be a freelance graphic designer, but now my life revolved around James, and I hadn't realized until that moment just how much I missed doing something for myself. I excused myself and made my way to the bar, hoping to find some distraction. It was then that I saw him. He was leaning against the bar, a drink in his hand, looking effortlessly at ease. He was tall, much taller than James, and his dark hair fell in waves over his forehead. His blue eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, something sparked between us. It wasn't just attraction. It was like he was seeing me in a way I hadn't been seen in a long time. "Hi," he said, his voice low, with a slight edge to it. "I hope you're not one of those women who think all these people are interesting." I blinked, surprised by his boldness, but then I laughed. "Honestly, I don't think I'm one of those women." "No." He smiled, a slow, almost mischievous smile. "I'm Christopher," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm not much for these kinds of events either. But I'm here for the free drinks. So I guess I can't complain." "I'm Julia," I said, shaking his hand. I was acutely aware of how much his grip made my pulse quicken. "And I'm here because my husband dragged me along." He chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "Yeah, I know the feeling. I get the sense that none of us really belong here, do we?" I couldn't help but agree. "Exactly," I said, leaning in a little, as if sharing a secret. "I can't even pretend to care about half of the conversations happening in this room." We both laughed, and for the first time in hours, I felt like I wasn't the only one trapped in this charade. "Want to get away from all this?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost like a challenge. "I know a place where we can actually talk without all the noise." I hesitated. I wasn't that kind of person. I was married. But something about his calm confidence, the way he didn't pressure me, made it hard to say no. I glanced over at James, who was engaged in another conversation, his back turned. He wouldn't even notice I was gone for a few minutes. I started to say, but then I caught myself. What was I even doing? I guess I could use a break. Christopher's grin was infectious, and I followed him as he led me out of the crowded room and toward the elevator. There was a spark of curiosity in me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was the excitement of doing something unpredictable, or maybe it was just the fact that someone was actually paying attention to me, really paying attention. As we got into the elevator, I could feel the tension building between us. The air felt thick, charged. My heart was racing, and I wasn't sure whether it was from nerves or something else. We didn't say much during the short ride down, but when the elevator doors opened, I followed him, unable to resist. It felt like we were doing something we weren't supposed to do, but somehow, it also felt freeing. We stepped out into the cool night air, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The noise from the party, the constant stream of small talk, it all felt miles away now. It was just me and him, standing outside the hotel, the city lights casting a soft glow on the pavement. I had no idea what was happening or what I was doing, but for the first time in ages, I felt a little bit alive. "Better?" Christopher asked, his voice casual, like nothing was at stake. I nodded, trying to hide the flicker of uncertainty that had crept into my chest. "Yeah. It's nice to get away from all the business talk." He gave me a sideways glance, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I don't know why people act like pretending to be interested in those things is a skill worth having." We all know it's just about posturing and networking. I laughed, a real laugh this time. The kind I hadn't felt in ages. Exactly. And here I am, pretending to be interested in a conversation about charity auctions. Like, what is that even? He leaned back against the building, taking a deep breath. So, what do you really do, Julia? When you're not playing the perfect wife at these parties? I froze, the question catching me off guard. I hadn't expected him to go there so quickly, to cut past the surface. Well, I hesitated, glancing around, avoiding his gaze for a second. I used to work as a freelance graphic designer. But that was before everything changed. Before you married Mr. Successful? He asked, his voice light, but his eyes focused, as if waiting for me to say more. I sighed, the weight of the truth settling in. Yeah, I gave it up for him. I'm fine with it, really. I support James. He's doing well. But as I said it, I could hear the emptiness in my own voice. I'm fine with it. But was I? Christopher studied me for a moment, a small frown playing on his lips. You don't sound fine. I guess I'm not. I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. I don't know. I used to have my own life, my own things to focus on. But now? I'm just in the background, you know. I'm just the wife. There was a silence between us, a quiet pause that felt almost too intimate. His gaze softened, and for a moment, I felt like he understood me in a way no one else ever had. You deserve more than that, he said quietly, his words hanging in the air between us. I wanted to protest, to say that it was fine, that I loved James, and that this was just part of the deal. But the truth was, I did deserve more. I had sacrificed so much of myself for this life, and I was beginning to wonder whether it was worth it. Before I could answer, he stepped closer, and I could feel the tension between us. Electric, undeniable. My heart started racing again, but this time, it wasn't out of nervousness. It was something else. Something deeper. Something I hadn't felt in years. I didn't expect to meet someone like you tonight, he said, his voice low. Someone who actually gets it. I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest at his words. Someone who gets it. I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a breathy exhale instead. I don't think you really know me. Maybe not, he said with a soft smile. But I think I'd like to. There it was again. The unspoken invitation. The connection that went beyond small talk. Beyond surface, level pleasantries. He wasn't just flirting with me, though I could feel the way his gaze lingered on me, the way his proximity made everything feel charged. He was seeing me. Really seeing me. And in that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe I'd been invisible for far too long. And then, just as quickly as the moment had started, it was broken. The sound of a car door slamming nearby caught my attention, and I turned to see James walking toward us, a slightly amused look on his face. There you are, he said, his tone casual, but I could hear the undercurrent of something more. I was looking all over for you. I smiled at him, forcing the warmth back into my voice. Sorry. I just needed some air. James glanced briefly at Christopher, but there was no real acknowledgement between them. Christopher simply gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. Well, we should get going, James said, turning to me. It's getting late. I glanced at Christopher one last time, feeling a strange sense of reluctance. His eyes met mine, and there was a flicker of something. Something that made my pulse quicken. Something that told me this wasn't the last time I'd see him. Good night, I said to Christopher, my voice soft. Thanks for the conversation. He gave me a small smile, a knowing look in his eyes. Anytime. I couldn't stop thinking about him. It was ridiculous, I knew that. I had a husband. I had a life. But in my mind, his face kept resurfacing, his voice, his touch, it all lingered, like some kind of magnetic force pulling me in. You deserve more than this. His words kept echoing in my mind. I wasn't sure why they hit so hard. Maybe because, for the first time in a long while, someone had seen me. Not just as a wife or a background accessory to someone else's success. But me. It felt wrong, it felt like a betrayal. But there was this quiet voice inside of me saying, what if it's not? What if this is what you've been missing all along? The days after that night were a blur of confusion and restlessness. I tried to push thoughts of Christopher out of my head. To return to my routine with James. Making breakfast, running errands, attending his work functions, but nothing felt the same. The silence at home, the endless questions I couldn't answer. I had the empty feeling that stretched inside me. Nothing was the same. I knew I should be happy. I had the life everyone would envy. Successful husband, nice house, everything in its place. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I hadn't realized just how far I'd gone into autopilot mode, just how invisible I'd become in my own life. That afternoon, when James left for work, I stayed behind, alone in the quiet of the house. It was so peaceful, and yet, I felt an overwhelming urge to do something. Anything. To fill the silence. The house felt so large, so empty. It was beautiful, sure, but it didn't mean anything to me anymore. I was sitting at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone when it buzzed. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name. Christopher. He had texted me. I stared at the message for a few seconds before tapping it open. I can't stop thinking about you. The words were simple, but they sent a jolt through my body. A rush of heat flooded my cheeks, and I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't a random text. This wasn't some flirtation. This was real. It was raw. It was dangerous. I sat there, staring at my phone. Part of me knew this was the moment I had to decide to walk away and never look back, or take a step into something I couldn't predict. I had to answer. I took a deep breath and typed back, my fingers shaking slightly. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you either. As soon as I hit send, a rush of emotion hit me, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I wasn't sure where this was going. But I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't go back. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. I want to see you again. Tonight. It wasn't a question. It was an invitation. It was clear, decisive, no room for doubt or hesitation. It was a direct call to action. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. My thoughts swirled in a chaotic mess. What was I doing? This was wrong. I had a life, a husband, responsibilities. I had always prided myself on being the dutiful wife, on supporting James no matter what. But now, I felt like I was standing at a precipice, about to fall into something unknown. And yet, there was something irresistible about it. Something thrilling. Something I hadn't felt in years. The weight of the decision settled on me like a heavy, suffocating cloud. When I typed back, my fingers moving before I could stop myself, his response came almost instantly. How about tonight? After work. I know a quiet spot. I swallowed hard. Tonight. I knew that would mean lying to James, sneaking around. I'd have to make excuses. Maybe he wouldn't even notice. He was always so absorbed in his own world, always so distant. But even as I tried to reassure myself that it wouldn't be a big deal, I knew the truth. I was making a choice. A choice to step out of the life I had built, to cross a line that couldn't be undone. I thought about James. About how much he loved me, how much he trusted me. And I hated myself for it. For considering throwing all of that away. But then, a thought flickered through my mind. Had he really seen me? Had he really known me at all? And there was Christopher. He didn't pretend to care about all the things James did. He didn't ask about stocks or portfolios or charity galas. He asked about me. What I wanted. What I needed. I stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. My heart was racing, my thoughts scattered. I felt a rush of guilt. What would I tell James? What if this ended badly? But then I stopped myself. Why was I thinking so much about what could go wrong? Why wasn't I thinking about what could go right? It wasn't like I had ever been this reckless before. But with Christopher, something was different. Something in me was waking up that I didn't even know was still alive. I glanced at the clock. It was still early in the afternoon. I had hours before I'd have to make any kind of excuse to leave. I could call in sick. I could make something up. But deep down, I knew I didn't need to lie. I didn't need an excuse. I needed to see him. Before I could guess myself again, I grabbed my purse and threw on a jacket. I didn't think about what I was wearing or whether I should change. I just needed to go. And the thought of seeing him, of being with someone who saw me, was overwhelming in the best way. I walked out the door, my mind racing, my heart pounding. As I started the car and pulled out of the driveway, I tried to convince myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't betraying James, at least not yet. This was just a moment, an escape. But even as I tried to tell myself that, I knew the truth. I was crossing a line, and there would be no going back. I didn't know exactly what I was expecting when I pulled into the parking lot of the cafe. My hands were shaking slightly, my stomach twisting in knots. I could feel my breath quickening with every step I took toward the entrance. There was a sharp clarity in the air, as though the world had suddenly sharpened into focus, and every decision, every second, mattered more than it ever had before. I was about to step into something I couldn't undo. I knew that, and yet, the pull toward him, toward that version of myself, was too strong to ignore. That the past few days had felt like an emotional maze, and now, I was on the edge, ready to fall into whatever this would become. I took a deep breath, adjusting my coat as I pushed open the door. The soft chime of the bell echoed in the quiet cafe. The dim lighting, the low hum of conversation. It all felt distant, like I wasn't even there yet. But then I saw him. Christopher was sitting at a corner booth, his back to the wall, his gaze sweeping the room as though he were waiting for me. When our eyes met, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. He smiled, that same knowing smile I had seen before, the one that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. "Julia," he said softly, his voice warm and inviting. He stood up, and for a second, I couldn't move. There was something magnetic about him, something that made my heart race and my chest tighten. I felt a knot form in my throat as I walked toward him. The words I had rehearsed in my mind evaporated, and I found myself standing there, feeling small, exposed. I wanted to say something clever, something that would explain why I was here, why I had come. But I didn't know how. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made me shiver. I tried to smile, but it felt tight on my lips. "Thank you. I wasn't sure if I should come." He reached out, gently taking my hand. It was a simple touch, but it sent a wave of warmth through me. "I'm glad you did," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "I've been thinking about you a lot. About us." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Us. He said it like it was already decided, like it was inevitable. And in a way, I realized, it felt like it was. The way he looked at me, the way he made me feel. Like I was more than just someone's wife. I sat down across from him, and he slid a glass of wine toward me. I wasn't sure if it was the wine, the ambience, or just his presence, but I felt the tension in my body start to loosen. For the first time in days, I wasn't constantly thinking about what I was supposed to be doing, or who I was supposed to be. I was just here. "I've been thinking about that night," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "About what happened. About you." His gaze softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "What are you thinking now?" I hesitated. It felt strange to admit the truth, to put everything I had been feeling into words. But it was almost like I had no choice. He had pulled something out of me that I hadn't even realized was there. "I don't know how to explain it," I started, my voice trembling. "But when you looked at me, when you really looked at me, I felt seen. Not like I'm just a part of the background. Not just a wife. I felt like I mattered." He didn't say anything for a moment, just let my words hang in the air between us. And then, with a soft smile, he said, "I get it. I've been seeing you from the moment you walked in that room." I wasn't sure if it was the wine or his words, but I felt my guard begin to crumble. I had spent so much of my life being the right person, the good wife, the dutiful partner. But now, sitting here with him, I realized I had been holding my breath for far too long. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to hurt James." Christopher's expression shifted, and for the first time, I saw something other than the casual charm that had made him so magnetic. There was understanding in his eyes. "You're not hurting anyone. You're just allowing yourself to feel what you've been denying, what you've been starving for." I shook my head, feeling a wave of guilt rush over me. "But I'm married. I'm supposed to be faithful. I've always told myself that loyalty means everything." His gaze softened again, and he gently reached across the table, taking my hand. "Loyalty is important, Julia. But so is your happiness. So is you. This isn't about him or anyone else. This is about what you need. What you deserve." His words hung in the air, like a challenge. A truth I didn't want to face, but could no longer ignore. "I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I don't know if I can keep living in this pretend life." Christopher leaned back, his eyes still locked on mine. "You don't have to decide everything right now. We can take this slow. But I'm not going anywhere. I want to be a part of your life, Julia." If you'll let me. I felt the weight of his words settle deep within me. It wasn't just about tonight, or about him. It was about me. About who I was. And what I had become. I had spent so long being someone I thought I was supposed to be. But here, in this moment, I could feel the possibility of something more. Something real. I wanted to pull away, to run back to the life I knew, to the familiar safety of routine. But deep down, I knew that wasn't what I wanted. Not anymore. I had crossed a line already. And I couldn't go back. I didn't expect it to happen the way it did. I thought I could keep up the charade a little longer, maybe buy some time, convince myself I wasn't making a huge mistake. But, as with most things in life, the truth has a way of slipping through the cracks. And when it does, it never comes quietly. I had been meeting Christopher for weeks after that night. Each time, it felt like another part of me was shedding. Another layer of the life I had built. James was still oblivious. At least, I thought he was. He was working late more often, traveling for business trips, and when he was home, I could see it in his eyes. The distance, the disconnection. We were two strangers, living under the same roof, pretending everything was fine. But even the best lies can't last forever. It was a Wednesday when everything came crashing down. I had just finished a late lunch with Christopher, and as usual, I was on edge, feeling both exhilarated and guilty. I told myself it was just a phase. That I would eventually walk away. But deep down, I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. When I arrived home that evening, I saw James's car parked in the driveway. He was back early. My heart skipped a beat. I tried to steady myself, to prepare for whatever was coming next, but nothing could have prepared me for the moment I stepped inside the house. He was standing in the hallway, a grim expression on his face. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry, exactly. But there was something colder, more detached about him than I had ever seen before. "Julia," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." I swallowed hard, my throat going dry. My first instinct was to lie, to pretend everything was fine. But something in his eyes stopped me. He already knew. "James, I began. But he cut me off with a sharp motion of his hand. "Don't," he said, his voice steady but with an underlying edge. "I already know." I froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice. "What do you mean?" He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes scanning my face like he was trying to figure out how far gone I was. Then, he pulled something out of his jacket pocket. A photo. It was a picture of me and Christopher, taken at that cafe. The same cafe where we had met for weeks, where I had allowed myself to slip further away from the woman I used to be. I felt my stomach lurch. How had he found this? "You don't even recognize yourself anymore, do you?" he asked, his voice almost too calm. It made my skin crawl. I can explain. I stammered, but the words sounded hollow, even to my own ears. James took a step forward. His eyes narrowing. "Explain what?" "That you've been seeing him behind my back. That you've been lying to me for months." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to beg for his forgiveness, to tell him I was sorry and that I was confused, that it was just a mistake. But the other part of me, the part that had spent all this time trying to break free, knew that I couldn't say those words. Not because I didn't care about him, but because, in some twisted way, I didn't want to go back. "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said, my voice shaking. "You didn't mean for this to happen," James repeated, his voice rising. "You didn't mean to betray me. You didn't mean to destroy everything we built. You didn't mean to throw away our marriage." I stood there, paralyzed. I couldn't look him in the eye. I didn't have the strength to face the hurt I saw in his expression. "You don't understand," I said, more to myself than to him. I wasn't happy. I don't know when it happened, but I lost myself somewhere along the way." "Lost yourself?" James's voice broke with disbelief. "So that's it? This is your excuse?" "You're not the only one who's been lost, Julia. I've been trying to reach you for years, but you..." He shook his head, disgust etched across his face. "You checked out a long time ago. And now you're telling me you were just waiting for someone to make you feel alive again." I could hear the bitterness in his voice, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. He wasn't wrong. I had been waiting for someone, anyone, but to make me feel something. Anything, because with James, I had stopped feeling anything at all. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but it felt like an empty apology. I didn't even know if I meant it. I didn't know what I was sorry for anymore. James stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he sighed, a heavy, defeated sound. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice softer now, but still edged with pain. "You've already made your choice." I opened my mouth to protest, but nothing came out. He was right. I had already chosen. And the worst part was, I didn't even know how to take it back. "Maybe this is for the best," James said quietly, stepping back from me. "Maybe we've both been living in this illusion. Maybe it's time to wake up." I felt the weight of his words settle in. A crushing realization that I had not only betrayed him but had also betrayed myself. Everything I had once thought was real was nothing more than a fragile facade. "James," I said, my voice cracking, but he didn't look back at me. He walked toward the door, grabbing his jacket from the hook by the front entrance. "I'm leaving," he said simply, the words hanging between us like a death sentence. "You can have your freedom, Julia. But you'll have to figure out what to do with it on your own." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My heart was a mess of confusion and regret, but I knew there was no turning back now. And just like that, James was gone. I didn't even hear the door close behind him. The silence in the house felt deafening. It felt like the world had shifted beneath my feet, and I had no idea where I was standing anymore. The weight of what I had done, the lies, the betrayal, the selfishness, crushed me. In the days that followed, I found myself alone in a house that used to be full of life. I spent hours walking around, lost in my thoughts, trying to piece together the wreckage of my life. But the truth was, I didn't know where to go from here. I had thrown away everything I had for something that, in the end, wasn't even real. Christopher had called me once. But I didn't answer. I didn't want to face him either. The person I had become with him was a version of me that I couldn't trust. And in the end, I realized that I didn't even know who I was anymore.